With the recent reveals at BlizzCon, and in an unprecedented twist of events, Blizzard has shown us the path to the next 3 expansions. A connected narrative spanning all 3, and the Titans are very much at the heart of this story. This video then will serve as a foundation for everything we know about them so far, while still looking to the future, and how all of this information could infer what's going to happen next. We do know that by the time the 3rd expansion is here, that the Titans' secrets will at last be laid bare, a truth for all to see. There are some great theories out there already, but the truth, that may have been in front of us all along, and this could merely serve to confirm our assumptions. After we have reviewed the Titans' influence on Azeroth so far, we will be using this information to take our best guess at what the Great Secret really is. I would like to preface that this will be a critical analysis. This does not mean I am here to attack any of the old or the new lore about the Titans. I will try to be as unbiased as I can be as we look back over the material. We begin all the way back in vanilla World of Warcraft. At this time, the Titans had only been mentioned briefly. Overall, they were very ambiguous, often vaguely referenced as nothing more than progenitor gods. It was the dungeon of Uldaman that first cemented them into the public consciousness. That is, outside of magazine publications, this dungeon was the first real major reveal involving the Titans. Some WoW history buffs are probably writhing in their chairs right now about how wrong I am. So with this in mind, I will mention I am not including the Warcraft RPG material. While great in its own right, the lore contained within is not considered canon. One of the questlines contained within was the Platinum Discs. As we journeyed through the ancient temple, surrounded by this Grecian-inspired architecture and frescoes, fighting the Titanforge creations for the first time, it would culminate in this infamous quest. The questline involved the recovery of the Discs of Norgannon, which positioned the Pantheon as a foundational lore characters, and simultaneously setting up one of the largest plot lines the game has seen to date, one that would not pay off until much later, until the expansion of Wrath of the Lich King. While this gave us some real insight into their creations, namely the Titanforged, this also gave us reveals into the origins of the Dwarf and the Gnome. This did not really give us any information on the Pantheon themselves. We got some names, but we could at least infer their motivations based on their creation. We learned that at least these gods seemed to favor creation over destruction. We learned that at least one of them, Norgannon, valued the preservation of knowledge, charging his creations with detailed records of the history of Azeroth. While on a darker note, even right here at the beginning, we saw the first cracks begin to appear. The origins of the Earth and, well, what had become of them, how the experimental failure led to a mistake in creation of the Trogs. This showed us that the Titans were fallible. Well, at least their creations. Even way back here, they were never omniscient, all-powerful gods, just beings that appeared godlike to us, but could still fail. As we move forward in time to the events of Anchorage, this revealed to us a connection. We found out that the old gods were connected to the Titans, that they had in fact built the very prison from which S'thun now rose. The Titans versus the old gods. This became the cosmic backdrop, upon which a lot of the future lore was built. The first expansion was released, The Burning Crusade. On the surface, we did not really get much forward momentum in the Titans story. Instead, we focused on some of the other origin stories of the game. However, what this did do is expand the lore of Sargeras, which served as even more world building for the Titans that would be revealed later. And we continued on, all the way to the second expansion, the Wrath of the Lich King. This would be, and still is to date, the most Titan-focused expansion we would ever get. While Arthas and the Scourge would be the main focus of the expansion, well over half would be dedicated to narratives focusing on our cosmic gods. Those who chose to start in the Howling Fjord were confronted with the Titan Forged right away. This main narrative arc would lead you even further into Dragonblight, the Grizzly Hills, and conclude in the awe-inspiring zone of the Storm Peaks. While we had come face to face with Titan architecture before, nothing was quite as impressive as the peaks that culminated in the Raid of Ulduar. One of the greatest enemies of the Titans, an old god by the name of Yogg-Saron, had long orchestrated events to free himself from prison. The people of Azeroth were running out of time to be able to stop his ascension, which would have spelled doom for the planet. It would be far too much to cover all of the lore that was uncovered, some twists, and many shocking reveals. I will, however, cover the major points, ones that are the most relevant to the discussion. The first is the idea of corruption. We had seen this before, this dark power of the old gods to twist and corrupt the Titan Forged and other life. But seeing one of the most powerful Titan Forged, Loken, completely corrupted, really drove home the message that this was beyond dangerous. The entire system put in place by the Titans had fallen to corruption, from the top to the bottom. The Prime Designate had fallen. Most of their forces had fallen to the Curse of Flesh, that was said to have been introduced from the machinations of Yogg-Saron himself. Countless wars had reduced the rest to mere relics of a lost age. We could not understand at the time why they had seemingly abandoned the world which they poured so much effort. Where were our Titan gods? The next reveal was one that went mostly unnoticed at the time. We lacked any context to see how important this really was. All the way back to the far west of the continent of Northrend, the Sholazar Basin. While not fully related to the current threat, was overall a far bigger reveal. It was shockingly reminiscent of Ungaro Crater at the time, and filled to the brim with Titan technology and facilities. It even connected to Ungaro via a large Titan gateway. It was here that we began to see the first water purification plants, and its not so subtle influence on the surrounding life and fauna. While it was sold as a place of creation, the machines themselves were ominous at best. The controlled lab-like environment set an unsettling tone. Did they see us as life, really? Or perhaps we were just another experiment to the gods? Their influence was everywhere in the zone. One particularly disturbing area was a Titan observation bay, named the Maker's Perch, in the west of the zone. When you look out from within, you can observe the surrounding area, but when swimming down in the outer area, it was camouflaged, a one-way mirror. Again, the laboratory-like conditions speak volumes. And lastly, there was the enigma that is Algalon, a being who worked with the Pantheon, but was separate from it. He was a Constellar, and his job was to initiate a process that would annihilate all life on the planet, in order to start over, should the old god's corruption ever proceed too far. Not to save it, but to wipe it clean. We hear from his own mouth that he had done this countless times to countless worlds. Something that, once we proved to him that we are worthy of life and not cold annihilation, had a profound effect upon him. He questioned how many times he had done the same to other mortals that deserved a similar reprieve. The opposing forces of the Titanic pantheon and the old gods were revealed to be inextricably linked to almost every major event in our world. At this time, we had two major developments in ratifying Titan lore: the release of the Cataclysm expansion, which once again was hinged on the eternal struggle between them. But far more importantly, we had the release of the Chronicles books. These books were the encyclopedias of Azeroth's entire history. They are still considered by most lore buffs the most important books in the series, to read at least, as they contain an immense amount of world building and explanation. I do have to mention that the lore within Chronicles is still canon, but it was later clarified that they were written purely from the Titan's perspective alone. That means that the information within is likely 90% accurate, but perhaps has a bias towards the Titans and their creations, perhaps painting them in a more favourable light. History is always written by the winners. This was, and still is, a wildly controversial topic. On one hand, I can understand that people were upset, as that was not the original promise of the Chronicles when people purchased them. I can also understand that Blizzard had written themselves into a corner. They forgot that MMOs don't just end, and if they wished to continue this, they had to sacrifice it on the pyre of momentum. As for my opinion on this, I am personally not a fan in the shift of promise. I think it was a terrible mistake to make in the first place. But it did happen, and I made my peace with it a long time ago, and I am not one to dwell. I do believe not everything has to be for everyone. If this was your deal breaker, I get it. At least you had all the great memories up until that point. Over the next few expansions, the Titans would play a prominent role. However, there would be no new reveals. There would be, instead, far more knowledge and nuance on things that we already knew. We had Pandaria and the engine of Nalak Shah, where we learned of flesh and stone shaping techniques. We had Uldia, that showed us the fruitless failures in genetic research and the far-reaching and deadly consequences they held, among many, many others. One major low point for the Titans was during Legion, where they finally reclaimed their rightful seats on the Pantheon once more and imprisoned Sargeras. And this is where the Titans remain today. So here is a total summary of what we know so far about the Titans. I will be as brief as possible, and then we'll use this to see if we can take an educated guess as to the big secret reveal that Blizzard has in store for us. The Pantheon of Titans are extremely powerful beings that roam the cosmos, compelled to order anything they come into contact with. Azeroth, the planet upon which we reside, we are told was a slumbering nascent Titan, and an extremely powerful one at that. But since our world was already infested by void creatures known as the Old Gods, they decided to wage a war. Their forces eventually win the day and imprison them. At the same time, they charge their creations with building strategic facilities across the surface, and some deep within the world for largely yet unknown purposes. They preserve this timeline in which they are victorious and move on. But one of their own order becomes corrupted and creates an unstoppable demonic army known as the Burning Legion, destroying the Pantheon in the process and forcing them to hide in their creations on Azeroth. Sensing the weakness, the Old Gods begin plotting their escape. One of these was to free the Titan Forged by giving them flesh and free will. This in turn makes them vulnerable to corruption, or just forgetting their purpose in the first place. One by one, the Titan prisons fall, and most of their once glorious influence over Azeroth becomes a crumbling memory. What is discovered about the future generations is rightfully met with trepidation. Over time, their reputation becomes tarnished as they lose control over their own narrative, spurred on by ill-made decisions carried out in their name by their own creations in the years since their passing. But there are still those that keep their faith in the Pantheon. Eventually, the mortals are forced into an open confrontation with Sargeras, and the Pantheon is revived and made whole once more. They retreat into the Great Dark in order to recuperate. So the question at the end remains, what could be the truth that is to be revealed about the Titans in the end? A lot of discussion has been had already on this topic. I see time and time again that people assume that Blizzard has changed the narrative, that they are priming the Titans as the main villain. But I usually have to ask where they've been all this time. Since Wrath of the Lich King at least, the Titan Pantheon has been morally grey at best. They have never really shown any overt interest in destruction or evil, but they are pragmatists at heart. They would happily wipe out life on the planet to protect their prize. Although, I do think the actual reveal is along this curve, just not quite so simple. The main clue lies in one of the mysteries that was never really revealed to us. That is, why they place so many of their machines in the planet. Vast, complex machines that are still running today, snaking through the ground. I don't think Azeroth is a Titan. This much we can surmise at this point. It would be easy to say that perhaps it is instead a first one. But while this theory has merit, it seems overly simple again. Instead, how about Azeroth, and subsequently Argus, or World Souls as we shall refer to them, are the natural and intended product of this universe? That is to say that the very reason the first ones pooled their powers together was in an attempt to procreate, to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The problem is, the forces that comprise these base parts would be replaced, unless they tip the scales in their favour. The world souls are raw potential, and to sway one to your domain would increase your sphere of influence. The big reveal is that just like the old gods before them, when they attempted to sway Azeroth to the void, and the Titans put a stop to them, only to go and flood the world with order magic, in an attempt to do the same. There's two ways this theory could lead. One, we have to fight off every force as they attempt to claim the world soul for themselves. Or instead, we find a way to return the domains to working in unison, each serving their purpose, and only removing those that refuse to seek balance. Overall, the Titan lore never changed, despite what the vocal minority would love you to believe. We have only ever gotten more context. I would love to hear your opinions on this, but either way, the future is looking bright. This Titan storyline promises to end a story arc that has existed since those early days of Uldaman. In next episode, we'll be looking more in depth at the Earthen, their relation, and how that new playable race is coming in A War Within. I'd really appreciate it if you drop me a like or a subscribe. It would mean the world. Oh, and don't forget to come back anytime.